My name is Margaret. After I had been in India some time, in 39, starting in 39, there began to be sessions in the evening when we sat round Baba, which we always did anyway, when I was asked to read out loud certain detective stories, which Baba seemed to enjoy very much. We managed to get the books out to India. It was very difficult. This was during the war, but we did get them, and they came. And Baba had loved very much Agatha Christie's writing, and her wonderful detective, an amusing detective, Poirot. But his favourite of all was, I think, Rex Stout, who has this extraordinary detective called Nero Wolfe. Baba enjoyed these stories very much. Now, he had a habit that didn't help us very much. He'd wait till the most exciting point and then close the book and say nothing more till tomorrow. And I had charge of the books, and I wasn't allowed to look in them, and no one was allowed to know till the next time we had a session together at the end of the story. This went on for a very long time. And even after I left India, I sent books out to India every 2 weeks of these different writers that Baba liked very much. Now, a strange thing that happened. We were in Secunderabad, and it was the last week of the European part of the war, not afterwards the bomb in Japan and so on, but the European part of the war. And we hadn't had any newspapers. Baba had kept them away from us. We knew nothing that was going on, nothing. Baba announced he was going to have a week's fast. Nobody knew why. I mean, we didn't anyway, not the people in the ashram. And this was he said, well, Mehra may share one day with me. No one else was allowed to share one day of this fast. And no one knew what was happening in the world. We just didn't know about it. So, but what happened to me was, at midday, and this was a place where the temperature was, heat was, day and night it was about 115. But at midday, for 2 or 3 days, Baba sent for me. He was alone. One was seldom alone with Baba. There was no one there. The girls had gone for a rest, and he'd sign to read. Fetch a book and read. So I fetched a book, and I sat down, and then Baba proceeded to cover himself with a sheet. And there was I sitting in the heat, reading aloud a detective story, all alone, faced only by a sheet, and I'm sure Baba couldn't hear a word I was reading. I would read until the room began to turn black, what with the heat, and Baba under the sheet, and I not knowing what was going on. I was just prepared to faint when Baba would spring up, signal for me to go away, take the book, and disappear. And he did that, I should say, at least 4 times during that period at the end of the war. One day I had to take the dog, Mani's dog, for a walk. I loved this dog very much. I got outside the gate alone for a few minutes, which is a very rare thing, and what a relief it was to walk along a street. And I walked, taking this dog along, and I came to a house on the other side of the road, decorated with flags. So I went over, curious to know what had happened in this strange town, Secunderabad. And it was Lieutenant Colonel's house, Lieutenant Colonel someone or the other, on the gate. So I knew that the war was over. And that was a very strange period of reading to Baba, when I read to him under a sheet. Well, the reading went on. It always went on. That's the end of that. Unless you want to say anything else about it. Go? In many places when we were with Baba, touring mostly, we'd sit round him in the evening wherever we were. So we had no chairs, we sat on the floor, and Baba would talk to us, and then he'd point to someone and say, tell a story. And this poor unfortunate person maybe never read a story in her life or something, but she'd scrape up something. And we all, at that time, Rano had some books sent out there from America with short stories in them. We were reading these short stories all the time, hoping we'd find something to please Baba. And then one evening I was absolutely stuck for a story, and I said, I'll tell you a story I wrote when I was a little girl. So Baba put up with this, and I told him the story. And then he said, now, for the future, every night, you're to make up a story, and I will give you the title the night before. So every night, Baba gave me a title of something, and during the day I had to make up a story to it. It was quite simple at the time, because I was doing a job. I was sitting at the gate, guarding the gate from anyone who wanted to come in. And so I sat there under this tree and made up these stories. And every night Baba gave me a title. And if the story wasn't quite up to scratch, he had a few words about it and said I hadn't put myself into it properly. So I had really to work quite hard every day. And finally, after about a month, this was in Panchgani, we were up in the hills. At the end of a month, he said, now, every day, you have to remember all the stories you've told and you have to write them down. So I had to go outside in the garden. There was never anywhere to write in any house, no table or anything, and write all these stories down for Baba. And that's the end of that one. I'll tell you a story of one of the inexplicable orders that Baba gave me. It was in London in 1934, and the Conservative Party had decided to boost itself by giving a large performance at the Albert Hall. There were scenes from English history, small scene up on the top wall and a small scene on the lower floor, and so on. And Quentin Todd and I, Quentin Todd was a disciple of Baba's who was a director in the theatre, were asked to put on the 3 small scenes. And one was a scene of Titania and Oberon. And Titania was a very, very beautiful young girl, and she played the part beautifully. It wasn't a difficult part, but still, a small dancing part. Well, as soon as we'd finished this thing and got it on the way, Baba came to London in 1934. And of course, Quentin and I were delighted that Baba was there, going to see our work, going to see what we've done. And we asked Baba if we might get tickets and take him, and he said yes. And I think he only allowed one of the men to come with him. He didn't let us take the whole of the party that was there at the house where we were staying. And everything went along quite well until Titania and Oberon were playing their scene. And Baba suddenly nudged me and spelt on the board, I wish to shake hands with that girl, but she must not know who I am. Now, this wasn't easy, because Baba's picture had been in the papers. This girl and anybody who was in the work that Quentin and I were doing knew of our connection with Baba. And how were we to get this girl to shake hands with Baba and not know who he was? So Quentin and I worked out a plan, not a very kind plan, but it had to be done. We went down to the dressing room with Baba and waited until this girl came from the stage. And as she came towards her dressing room, Quentin and I rushed at her and told her how badly she danced, what a terrible performance she'd given, and that if she couldn't do better than that, we would see that we never gave her another job, never. And the poor girl burst into tears, naturally, because she hadn't danced badly at all. And we got her well crying, good and strong, weeping. And then we said, oh, by the way, this is a friend of ours, Mehwan Irani. And she put her hand and said, how do you do? And so Baba turned away. He was perfectly satisfied. The girl was not. So we had to go around the next night and soothe her down, tell her how beautifully she danced, and we were sure she was sick the night before and we hadn't meant what we said. But that was one of Baba's strange orders, and I have no idea why he had to shake hands with that girl. In 1932, we were staying with Baba at a small hotel near Portofino. It was in Santa Margherita, really. And after a bit, the whole hotel got filled up with people who were visiting Baba. And we had a lovely time there with Baba, walking over the hills, and Baba was very, very full of light and life, and we walked over these lovely hills, and Baba was with us all the time. Now, what I'm going to tell you is about Baba and an amusing dancing lesson he had. Most of the other disciples had gone out to have their passports put right or something. I really don't know what was wrong with them, because my passport was all right and Delia was all right. But the others all had to go and have something done. So Delia and I were in the garden of this hotel alone, and suddenly Baba appeared. He looked very beautiful, as usual, but full of mischief and love, lots of love, but there was still a touch of mischief there. And he came up and he said to us, well, what shall we do? And as I've already told you, he had told us that he'd come to meet us on our level, so I had what I thought was a joke, and I said, well, let's leave the universe and have some fun, Baba. Leave the universe for the afternoon. So Baba nodded his head and looked delighted at the idea of leaving the universe. And first of all, he jumped on my back. That was the first piece of leaving the universe, and nearly broke my back. But he then said that he would like to have a dancing lesson. So Chanji took his hand and brought him to class. And I asked a few of the usual questions one asks a new pupil. And then I took his hand and I did 1, 2, 3 hop, almost like a polka step in front, going forward. And he joined in immediately. There was no having to learn it. And we danced all around the garden, and it was like flying. Baba was his hair flying and his white robe flying, and we both did 1, 2, 3 hop all around this garden, right round till and it was quite a long way, but I've never felt such lovely dancing in my life. I mean, it really was inspiring to move with Baba like that. And then I think I showed him something else, but it wasn't quite such an excitement and such a beauty as the first step. And that was Baba's dancing lesson. Meredith Starr, in telling us about Baba, told us a lot of things that were wrong, about the things we should not be allowed to do if we followed Baba, and things that were wrong to do. And among other things, he told us that we should not make up. Meher Baba would not like it, and very strict about not making up. So we were in Paris that Christmas, and Baba said he was going home via Marseille, and he said, well, Margaret shall take me to Marseille and see me on the ship. She has such excellent French, which wasn't true at all, but I didn't correct it. My French was awful. It's real good English French. But I accepted it, and so I went with Baba alone to Marseille. Chanji was with us, and I think Kaka. I don't know. There were 2 of the men disciples. And we went down to Paris by train. and I slept in the next compartment to Baba, and all night long Baba knocked on the wall. Every hour, on the hour practically. And it turned out he meant, I love you. So I didn't get much sleep that night, and we arrived at Marseille early in the morning, and went down to we took Baba's luggage to the ship he was going to sail on, and then we went back to the quay at Marseille to have breakfast. And we were sitting there, and I must have looked like nothing on earth, not having had much sleep at night, and no makeup on my poor face. And Baba looked at me rather as if he were not too pleased with the sight, and he suddenly tapped his face like this. And I thought, well, I don't know what that means, and I looked at Chanji for help, and Chanji didn't know either. So he did it again. And I thought, a sort of little joy came, and I thought, well, perhaps he means I may put on a little powder, but he can't bear this. So I got out my powder puff and showed it to Baba. He did this again. I thought, well, he can't mean rouge, after all Meredith said, they couldn't possibly. However, I got my rouge out, and I showed it to Baba, and sent me off to make her up in the ladies' room, which was quite a lesson as to what is wrong and what would lead one to God or anything else. It certainly wasn't going without makeup. Many of Baba's early disciples, Western disciples, had been theatre people. For instance, Norina Machiavelli had been an actress. Quentin Todd was director of the Midnight Follies and of all Charlot's revues in London. Delia had run a tryout theatre with her brother, a very well-known theatre in London. I had been a dancer and had been with the Russian ballet and had run my own company and and worked for the Carl Rosa Opera Company and so on and so on. And so Baba, I think the reason Baba asked for theatre performances was to bring what was in us, that certainly is part of the ego, up to the surface. He would ask for us to improvise or work on theatre shows, more or less theatre shows for himself. The first one I remember was when he was coming to London. I think it was in 33. We were all living together in a house in Ealing, not at all congenial house, and we were not at all congenial, all shut up there together. We were waiting for Baba to come to London or make the next move. So Baba sent a message that when he came, he wanted a performance, a theatre performance. So we borrowed Delia's brother's theatre and his lighting experts and everything, and we got a performance ready for Baba when he came. And he said he enjoyed it very much. Now, the next performance I remember was in Portofino, when we stayed at Alta Chiara. There was a very large room there, a ballroom. And we got together a series of short scenes in which we made a great deal of fun of... this is a song we sang for Baba, or at least this is part of the song. We are the girls of Baba's camp who heard so much about, and everybody stares at us whenever we go out. Now, this was my verse. For I am just Zuleika. I thought that I could dance. I've lost my school, I've lost my hope, and I think I've lost my chance. Then we sang all together towards Baba. We sang it straight to Baba. We sang, the last line was the punchline of the song. For we are not God realized, but we hope it's so with you. We also wrote a play, also taking off what Baba had been doing. We each took our own we became our own selves at about 70 years old. I think this was rather a prophetic play anyway. And Delia was very old and Minta was very old, and I played Norina's part. They left me out altogether. I played Norina's part. And at that time, Baba had been playing us up, or playing up a game about the perfect boy. I don't know if you ever heard that. But he said that there was a perfect boy that had to be found, and that he was somewhere in Europe, and this boy had to be found. Well, Kitty was sent to Scotland, and she brought back a boy who was rather cross-eyed and an extraordinary-looking creature, and he got sent back. He was to be the handsomest boy in the world. Norina was sent here, and other people were sent to other places. So we based the play on this perfect boy. We were very old, and we were sitting around the table, and I was copying Norina's remarks. Fantastic, I said at intervals, and so on. And there was a lot of it, but the point was, finally, the door opened and in came Quentin Todd with a hat on his head with a feather at the back and shorts and a coat, and he walked in, and we were all delighted. "I think the boy at last, this must be the boy," said everybody. So we asked him questions. We said, "Do you speak English?" And he said, "Oh, yes, yes." "Do you speak French?" "Oh, oui, oui." "Do you speak German?" "Ja, ja." "And Russian?" "Da, da." And we all looked at each other quick, like, this is the boy at last. And then Baba will do this, and Baba will speak directly. This beast knows this boy is found. Well, just at this moment, the door opened again, and in came Kaka, dressed as a mailman, with a letter addressed to Norina. No, it was a telegram addressed to Norina, which she tore open, and it said, owing to an eruption of Vesuvius, I shall not be speaking on April the 1st. And we all fainted, except Delia, who put up her arms and she said, "I still believe." A group of us went to Venice with Baba to see him off. He was going back to India, sailing from Venice. And on one of the days we were there, he announced that we should go for a trip out to the Lido. So we got on the boat and we had a lovely trip out. It was most enjoyable with Baba on this little steamboat. And when we got there, we walked about a little. Lido seemed a very dull place, I must say. It had a lot of advertisement, but it seemed very dull that morning. And some of the disciples decided that they'd like to go for a swim. And I think that they didn't realize it. This was very early on in our association with Baba, that if you went out with Baba, you did not leave Baba to go for a swim or do anything else. And however, they didn't realize this, because I don't think anyone would have been disobedient to Baba deliberately. But they went and hired some swimsuits, and they all went off to swim. Delia and I and the 2 Indian men disciples stayed with Baba. And Baba got very impatient and signaled to the men disciples saying, where are they? What are they doing? Why aren't they here? And he finally got so impatient that we went to the quay and took the first little steamboat back. And Baba sat looking very dark on the boat, and he didn't talk to us at all. When we got back to the hotel, he sent for Delia and me and talked for a long, long time about how in the East they would never have done such a thing, and the West was no good, absolutely no good, and it was terrible. Now, poor Delia and I, we hadn't done a thing, but we were getting all Baba's annoyance about them going off to leave him. And we started to cry, and there we were crying away, which I don't think pleased Baba anymore, what was going on in the Lido. And after a time, Delia got so worked up. Delia's a very dramatic person, if you don't know her. She got worked up and said, "Baba, I've got £300 in the bank. Please take it." I think she thought she was going to save the West, get a better name for the West, because it wasn't very popular at the moment. Well, this went on for quite a time, and finally all the others came back looking radiant after their swim, and some of them had bought flowers for Baba, and they came in full of stories and jokes and everything, and Baba welcomed them and gave them a lot of love and affection, and Delia and I sat there thunderstruck. Not a word did he say to them at all, and we'd taken all this, and Delia and I really felt pretty bad about it. But it didn't matter if that's what Baba wanted, really. But at the moment, we didn't find it very great fun. Dear microphone, I'm dead. I can't tell another story, and I'm being bullied. I hope the microphone's off. Tell us the word appointment. Yes, I will. This was a thing that seemingly started in Zurich, but I think it had been building up a little bit before. Quentin Todd was one of the most charming creatures you've ever seen. He had great charm. Baba brought him to America. He introduced Baba to people like Tallulah Bankhead and Marie Dressler and Mary Pickford. He knew everybody. He was in the theatre. He was a director. But he had great charm. And Baba took him also to Ceylon with the Indians. He went about with Baba quite a lot in the early days, and he loved Baba very much. But he was very sensitive. As many artists are, it was absolutely impossible for Quentin to get a sharp word or anything like that. He just couldn't take it. It wasn't in him. Now, in Zurich, there were two German people, a man and a woman. And the man, Baba took quite a lot of notice of. But the woman, it was one of the few people that I've ever seen him ignore. She had nothing given to her. I mean, unless something in her and we didn't know about it. But he didn't address her, didn't do anything. Walter Mertens, in whose house we were staying, he had a wonderful garden and fruit and so on, and he made a very special wine. And he asked Baba if one night we could have, Baba would give us each a little drop of wine, a little thimbleful actually it was. And Baba agreed that we would all gather in a room, upstairs room, and that he would give everybody who was staying there just a thimbleful of this wine, which was like having a sacrament. I can tell you, to have wine given you by Baba. He told Quentin Todd, he said, "This woman, that German woman, is not to come in. She can't come in and have the wine with everybody, and you are to tell her." Now, there was a thing for a sensitive man to do. First of all, to hurt this woman's feelings and tell her she couldn't come in. And he didn't do it. What he did was, he asked someone else to do it without explaining that it was Baba's order, a very strict order. He told this other woman to do it, and she didn't realize it was important that this woman wasn't to come in, and the woman was never told. So Baba had just handed out these little drops of wine to all of us, and suddenly there was a knocking on the door, and round the door came this woman. And Baba looked as if he couldn't believe his eyes, and he turned a look of such pathos on Quentin. You know, the look was, "You've disappointed me. Is this your fault?" And Quentin turned, I don't know what colour, puce, and started to explain that there was a story that just made no sense. So Baba, to save Quentin, offered him a glass of wine. And Quentin said, "Oh no, Baba, I can't take that glass of wine. I've done wrong. Absolutely refused. There was a second disobedience. And so Baba looked at all of us and turned us all out. We didn't have our wine. We were all turned out. And Quentin remained with Baba. But I have no idea what passed between them. After leaving Zurich. Quentin, Delia, Mabel and I went to Tossa for a holiday. But before that, Quentin and Norina and several of them were in Marseille with Baba in a hotel. And Baba decided he wanted to take a lot of budgerigars, those very small birds, back to India. So everyone was sent out at varying times in the day to buy a cage with a budgerigar in. And they were transferred from the small cages into an enormous cage of, it must have been about 4 feet wide and very tall. And Quentin's job was to transfer the birds from the little cage into the big cage. Well, one afternoon, Norina went out and bought a cage with a couple of budgerigars in and came back very pleased and showed them to Baba. And Baba said, lovely, and all the rest of it, and showed his pleasure. And he called Quentin to put the birds in the cage. And Quentin said, Baba, can you wait for a few minutes? I'm just having my afternoon tea. He was one of those people who just couldn't go without his cup of Earl Grey tea in the middle of the afternoon. And Baba was so annoyed that he told Adi, his own younger brother, the younger Adi, to put the birds in the cage. And Adi, not being used to these birds, or birds of any kind, they escaped. And Quentin was really in disgrace. And from that time, after Baba's departure, we went down to Tossa in Spain for a holiday. And Quentin gradually got colder and colder about Baba. And when we talked to people, there were a great many German refugees down there. And when we talked to these people about Baba, and they were interested in a way, not enthusiastic, but still, Quentin turned away and left us. And he turned right away in the end and began to say things about Baba that were not very nice. And he gradually left Baba altogether. But it was a question of that was disobedience of carelessness, not of deliberate disobedience. And the second one was of enjoying himself, his tea, and he was enjoying something and didn't obey Baba once. Quentin was, he lived till I went back to England after the war, and one of the first persons to come and see me was Quentin. And he was again interested in Baba. And we spent a day in Kew Gardens talking about Baba and all that had happened in India. I then came over to America, and I heard a little while after that Quentin had died. And he died of malnutrition, the wars. Many people died of, there was not the nutrition. But I think before he died, he again loved Baba, so that was all right. In Myrtle Beach, one day he said to me, you will live so many years. And not another word. I haven't reached that time yet, but I don't think I'm going to be very joyful during that year. And I'm not telling anyone else in case they all come round and watch to see if I'm passing out. Something he said to me, I was alone with him, and I said to him, I said, this is right in the early days, this was in the first, just about the Christmas time of the first year he came. And I said, Baba, when you were young, before you were realized, did you know or did you have any feeling that there was something ahead for you, something that you were going to do? And he said, no, not really. But I was, in a way, different from other people. I never knew desire. That was an interesting thing. This was just before I left India to go back to England. And one of the women disciples came to me and said, you're a dreadful disciple going back to England and not fighting to stay here. After all that Baba's done for you, you ought to stay here and this is all wrong. In fact, she attacked me very heavily and then went away and left me. And I was lying on the bed, and I started to cry because I couldn't ask to stay any longer. I felt so ill, and I just felt I couldn't take any more. Anyway, so at that moment, Baba chose to appear, and he came and sat down and said, "Why are you crying?" So I told him what had happened, and he waved it all aside. And he said, "You will go back to England, but you won't stay there. You're not to stay there. You're to go to America as soon as possible and get over as much of America as you can." Well, I did get to America, and I should say within the 2 years I went to practically every town in America with ballet theatre. So he can arrange things very well if he wants it. Otherwise, I had no money whatsoever to go anywhere. All right. Well, Baba's birthday was going to be celebrated on February the 22nd. I think this was in 42, I'm not sure. And we had nothing. It was during the war. We had no flour. We had nothing much at all. And we didn't know what to do to make a feast or something. Well, out of a lot of old flour that was found up somewhere and a few other things, in the kitchen they concocted a 7-layer cake for the 7 planes. And we made a ladder and went up to the 7th plane, a poor little man hanging on it about the 3rd plane. And we had a few other things we hung on of our own just to trim it up. And that was for Baba's birthday cake. Well, in the evening, Baba called us and said he was going to give us a little drop of wine. Again, you could hardly see the wine if he gave it to you, but it was a sacrament, quite definitely. He went over and looked at the cake and showed his pleasure, and he waved his hands and how wonderful it all was that we should have the cake. And he took another look at the cake and tore the 7th plane off the top and walked off with it. I don't know what he meant, whether it meant that we weren't going to get there or anything else, but he just tore the top off this cake and went away. So then he came back and he gave us each little drop of wine, and it went to my head.